5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to this week's edition of the EUVC Lowdown, the show that wraps up the week in European venture with some of the key people making the headlines. And joining us today on the show, we have Linda from Karma VC, Freddie from Isomer Capital. Of course, Dan is here again, our lovely Dan, GP of Superseed, David and Andres, the dastardly duo of EUVC themselves. And I'm your host, Kathy White, founder of CEW Communications. Now, the first thing to discuss on the podcast today, congratulations are in order, because 3 of the people on this call recording the podcast are now working together. So, David, Andres, I hear that you have formalized a relationship with Isomer Capital, and I'm going to pull from a great article that Dan Taylor from TechEU has published this morning covering the announcement. So the European VC founders Andres and David both now add the title of venture partner to their CVs. However, the move isn't quite a traditional venture partner addition to the roster, as the grand plan is for Andres and David to help VCs build their funds via the European VC content platform and its syndicates that allow them to build vested communities of founders, operators, angels, and VCs as operator LPs. So it's big news, guys. Tell us a little bit more. How excited are you?
It is very big news, Kathy. Thank you for saying that. I am personally very excited. I think Andreas is as well, but he'll share that in a second. But you know, it's kind of cool because we've been working with Isomer for some time, and it feels like it just kind of naturally progressed. I think Freddie has met us quite some time back, kind of popping in and out of the Isomer office whenever we're in London doing our events and stuff. But I think, you know, what is really interesting about it from my perspective, and I think Joe Schwartz from Isomer said it in that same article, it's like we found ourselves engaging in the same type of topics. We find ourselves, you know, striving towards similar goals, but leveraging very different toolkits, right? So EUVC is almost a media and community company first. Isomer Capital is an investment house first, right? And it's so interesting, the synergies that you can create from that. And so I am particularly very excited because, you know, we look at our business as a flywheel effect, and now I feel like we've just added an extremely strong component to that flywheel, because Isomer, in our opinion, is probably the OG of LP investing in Europe. So really excited. Stay tuned. We will not share what will come next, but I can guarantee a lot of cool stuff will come next, and hopefully our audience appreciates it.
Awesome. Andres, how are you feeling about the announcement today?
I'm rather down. I was expecting...
You're down? Oh, you're down. Oh, no. Okay.
Well, I'd expected a huge capital injection to my private accounts instead of a PR release or something, but that didn't come. So no, of course, everything David said, that was completely on point. We didn't know, Kathy, that you would drop this thing in here, but he said everything that he should if he was on script, so that was beautiful. I'm just super hyped about it. I honestly, as David said, it's something that's been growing for a long time. Joe, who's the managing partner and founder of Isomer, has been a mentor of ours for a long time. So for that reason, it's super cool to now have, you know, a formal relationship as well. And then I'd maybe say that when we back in the days were kind of discussing this, Dave and I, we did some digging and trying to figure out who we wanted to actually work that closely with, and it just became very, very apparent. Freddie sitting here pointing at himself, and of course then when we met Freddie, we just knew he's the guy. There's nothing to do there. Just before the show, we told him that he should take off his beanie and instead wear a snooze and his hair loose, and he's already doing that. So he's taking recommendations from the best of the best. So no, but Isomer has a great reputation. The GPs, when we reached out to them to diligence the whole team and what is like 10 years into the relationship, we only got great feedback. So we're very hyped about this, and I'm sure we can build something amazing together.
Awesome. Freddie, how's it actually been working with them?
It's been a lot of fun. These guys bring a very different angle and very different insights, along with not only the media compartment, but what they're doing with the syndicates as well will work in a very interesting way alongside Iceman. So it's been a thrill. It's been a lot of fun. And, you know, as a young VC and thinking about my content creation and my personality and brand out there, these two have been extremely helpful and been great advice.
Yeah, so personality is no beanie.
Apparently not. And recovering from the man flu, and I'm just being made sat in the cold.
Oh, cruel.
But then do the snooze instead. But I'm sitting here bald as fuck, and I'm looking at your hair every single time we talk and think this guy has an amazing head of hair, and then he hides it in a beanie. I was very disappointed to see you even go that far. And Dan is sitting here not wanting to say anything because he has amazing hair as well, but we're not commenting on it.
Unwaxed today, unwaxed, darling.
I was just going to say, Andres, it's been like an interesting week because obviously we made the announcement of your work with Isomer, but earlier on in the week there were some other announcements, you know, LPs doing different things in the market, which is interesting. It all seems to be kind of changing. Why do you think all of this is happening now?
So first of all, I think there's been a bit of a money grab in the industry. Both VCs coming or new VCs coming in that maybe should have stayed out. We've seen late stage slash private equity firms coming in that should maybe also have stayed out. And then of course we've seen the same thing on the LP side. We've seen people wanting to raise LP funds or starting to raise fund of funds that maybe isn't ready for it or isn't really committed to it or have the background for that. So that's part of what we have seen. Not at all pointing fingers, especially here obviously to Molten, who is one of the big announcements that's been this week. Amazing to see Jonathan ramping up their activity with their fund of fund program. That's very exciting.
On that note, sorry Andreas, on that note, we also had the Seed Stars announcement, which is an incredibly interesting project as well. Completely different playbook from most of the things we normally talk about, because that's emerging markets focused. So we also want to share some love with those guys, which we actually launched the pod episode in tandem with their announcement. But yeah, but I would maybe just double click on what Andreas was saying. But Andreas, over to you. Go on. Sorry.
Now I was just about to finalize and then say one thing we did talk about was that just as David some time back came into Sifted with an article saying that GPs should think about when they announce their funds and how they do it. I think that we had an interestingly similar discussion, because on the back of what's been happening the last few weeks, we've seen fund of funds getting away with announcing stuff as being news that aren't news, and perspectives on the market as if they're new perspectives or they're seeing trends that are new, and they're just not. and David's article, of course, was both targeted at GPs, but it was also targeted at media. That media needed to think about what they're putting out there and diligence whether they're restating facts from someone who's pushing marketing speech, or if they're adding to the adding actual insights to the market. And I think that in this case we've seen some stuff also kind of state things as news that aren't news.
Can we go back to the money piece and the available? I hate the phrase dry powder. I want to cringe, like we're not fucking pirates. It just goes through me. Anyway, I'm slightly concerned that the amount of cash that's come in, forget the tourist stuff. So forget the crazy tourist growth nonsense. That whole, I think I read a stat somewhere about 70% of the crazy faster e-scooters and grocery deliveries, but a lot of that, 70% of that capital was people coming in to make money in greater fool and trying to hand the basket to the next fool. So that stopped, obviously. But I'm slightly concerned that a lot of the innovation we're seeing, we're going to talk about Gen Z VC in a minute, a lot of the innovation and the niche is going to be squashed in generations to come, in 2 or 3 vintages time, because there isn't that cycle and that roll through, because people now sitting on their hands or not investing or not getting into venture or not doing things means that there'll be less capital available in 2, 5, 7 years time. So I'm not so worried about now. There's a lot of dry powder baked in, and there's a lot of niche VCs coming through. Wonderful. But I'm worried about the ripple effects. I'm worried about how, because what people tend to do, and I include myself in this, when the chips are down, is they go back to form and they go back to what they know and the safety. And that's not innovation. That's not trying new niches, trying new things. So I think we've just got to be very mindful of the fact this is a very of the now thing, but we haven't got through this inertia period where all the money that's baked in and all these new things that are, will they get follow on? Will there be more innovation in the future? So I think it's just something to be quite mindful of.
It's difficult to come off that rant, but yes, for sure. I think also it's always a problem with the cyclical nature being as it is, right? Because then you have a hype period where everyone comes in, and then that hype period by definition will end up being high, with high valuations, and then the people that came in that period will get hurt, and then they get out again, and then there's only the true believers left to take advantage of the real bad situation where you get the real good deals done, and then you're in a weird position again.
But listen, pre-seed and seed valuations haven't gone down; they've gone up, and they're still going up. So there is growth that's caught the cold, and the mid tiers and the greater fool and the nonsense and the crazy lower down the food chain. The valuations are still going up. So there is definitely a them and us period of this fracturing in VC.
But do you think, just as a quick question, do you think that the valuations are going up because they're preparing, for the longer period ahead, trying to get more runway, and as such they're taking usually the advice that early stage investors are giving to them, or their friends or whoever's giving to them, right? You need this long runway, don't want to dilute, and therefore that's why the valuations are going up.
Yeah, that's right. I think that the data backs it up, where there are fewer rounds being done, but they're being done at a higher quantum. The challenge with that is that on the flip of that, a lot of startups and founders that I'm working with are now anxious to spend money, and they're sacking salespeople, and no, whoa. It's not about sitting on, not about war chesting and then sitting on that. It's about finding the angles, changing the ICPs, thinking about territories, grow through this. The smart founders will grow through this. And I love this. I can't remember who wrote it. It was a really fascinating article about these kind of the overnight successes are the ones in 10 years time that'll be thinking like this. They're not focusing on sales and how to adjust to the new world. But yes, I think you're right. I think there is a kind of this kind of slightly bigger glut. There are more people now being more sensible, thinking about real business models coming downstream. But at the same time, you have to work out where the angles are to grow through this, or you'll just be sitting on mountains of cash and you'll have analysis paralysis, and then you just, what are you going to do? And then you won't catch the crest on the other side.
I was just about to say that I saw a TechCrunch piece that argued that looking at data from past times, startups that didn't take the advice of their VCs to cut their costs would actually be the ones that would come out on top in the end. So, and then the article concluded, well, don't take the advice of your VCs. And I kind of questioned that and said, well, how about the scenario where the firms that actually did perform very well and did have a good functioning model, they were also advised by their VCs that they should, plowing through, as Dan just said, keep going, keep moving. Whereas all the others that, did not perform very well, they should cut down. And obviously they will also be the ones that did not perform well, right? So it's like, what is it that leads to what here, right?
Just focus on client. It's not binary, as you just said, but you've got to focus on clients. It's almost ignore. 85% of VCs in Europe have never even worked in a startup. So you've got to balance where you get your information from, and you have to find a way to grow through this. You have to find a way to keep up the velocity and cadence in your sales model. Otherwise, you won't be able to raise at a significant enough clip. So it's finding that balance here.
And if I could just add a note to the statistic you just said there, 85% of VCs in Europe haven't worked in a startup. It's so important, I think, for us to remember that we are a bit in a bubble, because Dave and I, we don't meet those VCs really. It's very, very rarely that we meet those VCs that don't have an operator background or have been angel investing for so long that you can almost say that they do. So in that sense, I think that we also here on the Lowdown need to remember that VC in Europe is still, to a large extent, especially the founders, because they are seeing all the VCs that we don't meet, who don't have any idea what it is to be in a startup. And we need to remember that that's also part of the industry still.
I think in any case, you need to kind of qualify the advice that who are you getting it from and what are they actually qualified to say, right? So if someone's maybe gone through a few downturns and they're a VC and they haven't been in a startup, that's all right, right? Like they know what to expect and maybe have some experiences to share. If their background's in finance, you're more than welcome to listen to their financial advice, right? But if they're an operator, you want to kind of get operational advice. And I think this kind of calibration, like who is this person? What are they qualified to tell me? Should I listen to them? This process should be constantly ongoing in their heads as well, I think.
Yeah, be the best filter in the world is what I tell my founders. And that includes me. That includes me. And also I love being wrong, because wrong is often where the twist and the contortion is. Like, here's what I think, here's how I see the world. Now prove me absolutely wrong. Let's go. Let's find a way.
On that note, I'm going to bring us into the second topic that we had planned for the show today, which is Generation Z VCs.
What is Gen Z, Kathy? What can you just?
I'm really glad you asked, Dan. I will tell you exactly what Gen Z is. So bear with. Gen Z.
Wikipedia.
It's I've actually pulled it from Wikipedia. It's the first social generation to have grown up with access to the internet and portable digital technology from a young age. Members of Generation Z, even if not necessarily digitally literate, have been dubbed digital natives. Now, in terms of when they're born, or when the whole generation is kind of defined, it's defined as around about 1997 until the early 2010s. So that covers the whole of Gen Z. So a Zoomer, that was a new word for me today, born in 1997 would be 25. Does that help? So that's why we've got some young people on the show today to talk to us about Generation Z.
Fuck you.
I'm including myself in that, by the way. That's I'm the millennial generation.
I'm 50 tomorrow. 50. What the fuck? How did that happen? I turned around for 10 seconds and I'm 50. And I've been playing 25-year-olds. I'm like you. Let's go. Like, I'm not like you.
Tomorrow you're two Gen Zs.
I'm Gen Z 2. There you go. Squared.
Well, happy birthday in advance. No, the reason we're bringing Gen Z onto the show is because in recent weeks, there's been a hell of a lot more coverage of Gen Z VCs in the media. So the Times did a great piece. There's an article from Fast Company that's come out a couple of days ago. As a woman in the US, Megan, who's kind of leading the charge, has gone full time in looking after a community of something crazy like 20,000 Gen Z VCs. So it's, new perspectives, younger generation. It's interesting, actually, just flipping back to the conversation we were having a moment ago, thinking about, when you're working with a VC, understanding if they had an operator background, founder background, what do they bring to the table? What does a Gen Z VC bring to the table? It's an open question. Linda, can I bring you in on this?
Yeah. And I was actually thinking about it quite a lot. My background is in executive search, so the way that I think about teams, or the way that I think about how people should collaborate, or kind of differences in perspectives are important. So I think that a good example was, for example, if I compare myself to my parents, right? They grew up in the Soviet Union. I'm from Estonia, right? Like, they spoke Estonian and Russian. My dad learned how to speak Finnish, basically because he could get like television from Finland in Tallinn. So very kind of cut off from the Western world in many ways, very much in one infosphere. So when you grew up, for 20, 30 years, only open to one kind of data and then one kind of way of looking at the world, it's very hard then to suddenly be exposed to all of these different ideas and the world more broadly. So when I was growing up, it was already Estonia as an independent nation. And I think I was 5 years old when I was already speaking English and I could do basic sentences, right? Like bilingual at 5. So in that sense, it's a very different type of information that I got access to, internet, but also language, right? So from a very early age, I was exposed to, what are people doing in the US? What are people doing in the UK? How is it going in Asia? Because, the language as well as the kind of the just info. So you need to be very critical from a very early age, like, okay, what is actually real information and what isn't? And I think it's still a struggle that people, I think my age are going through, because there's so much information coming your way. And I think that the talk about having this like data bubble around you through the kind of different algorithms that want to get your attention, so they're feeding you things that you want to see. So I think that there's so many things that are different in our generation and the way that we evolved our thinking and etc. But overall, I think it's also what we spoke about before, right? Like, there's a brilliance in seeing these people who've gone through many of these downturns and different types of the economy and had these experiences. But then you also need this younger generation that's seen something completely different, is asking the whys. Why is this like this? Why do you think this is like this? And I think this key word here is learning from each other. And I think as long as that's there, there's value. If there's no learning, if there's no openness to kind of discuss, then it doesn't really matter who's in your team. Yeah, my 5 cents, I guess.
I think that's really interesting. What I've been seeing among these Gen Z communities and the Gen Z that we meet is that many of them are extremely driven and ambitious, and also very kind of connecting to what Linda was saying, super kind of community focused, learning focused. Some of them are actually joining us in our syndicates even, right? So we see some of that also connecting with us, and that is extremely interesting. And I think it's really interesting to see this generation that sees VC as the first kind of job role they want to land, right? Which is actually not that common in Europe up until now, right? Or wasn't that common in Europe. I think that's super interesting. But there's also some questions, right? We're just talking about, as Kathy said, right? So 80 whatever % of the VCs in Europe aren't founders, right? So if you're a Gen Z coming into venture, well, you don't have a lot of work experience. That's a fact, right? You probably didn't build a big tech success company. Is that important? Isn't that important? What are the pros and cons? I think there's a lot of pros and cons there. But I think it's incredibly interesting trend. I still don't have an opinion whether how it will impact the venture ecosystem as a whole, though.
Any predictions on the more Gen Z VC emerging managers, right? Like, if we're saying that the oldest of that generation is going to be 25 roughly, then are we looking at people that are, if they're super confident, have this big view on the world, are always asking the whys and everything, we're going to see more funds?
For sure. We've seen a few, right? We have a first Momentum out of Germany, super cool team. They've been at it whilst at university, right? Doing deep tech. So interesting team. It's early days to say if what's the performance like with these funds. You have Enzo Ventures out of Spain also doing an interesting job partnering with some more established players, which is on the one hand wise because you can kind of get those learnings into your own system. And there's the undisputable king of Gen Zs, right? Harry Stemmings.
I thought you would say Freddie.
He's the prince still. He's the duke.
Yeah, no, I was just mostly thinking that, like, overall, like, if there aren't any coming up or enough coming up, that there should be more, because I think Daniel were talking about earlier about like having this like actual innovation coming in and taking risks. And I think that it's always been like that the younger generations do take more risks and they are more open to it and kind of are funding that innovation in a way if you're kind of going into it. So I think that as we have all of this group here, then we should definitely put more focus onto it, even if there are some coming up.
Yeah, I just want to add, what does Gen Z not have? And that's experience. So what are we going to bring to the table? And that is the sort of the greater risk, the asking the questions, the learning, the hustle. I think that we've kind of got a bit of a point to prove, a bit of a chip on our shoulder. We're young, so yeah, and we're bringing. I think there is this whole conversation as well around diversity. And I think in teams having that diversity of thought within age as well is extremely important.
I'm going to ask one of the questions that actually Andres, I think, popped on the little running doc that we have hidden behind the show. I'm not going to aim it at Dan. I think he's feeling a little bit delicate. More for Linda and Freddie, but and sorry for the phrasing. As a note, I didn't write this question, but I am going to read out. What would you say to the old timers if you could say anything?
I'd say try to understand. I think that most often what I see is that, this experience sometimes makes you slightly arrogant. And then it kind of goes like, I've seen this before, like, I know what's going to come. And this kind of thinking of, there's nothing new in the world. Whereas I think that if the younger people are coming with questions, if they are coming with ideas, I think it's maybe not the idea itself is important, but where the question came from, where the idea came from, what was the process behind it? Because that usually unlocks something, because questions don't come out of nowhere. They don't come out of like thin air. So like really getting behind it and having this like open dialogue between like, hey, like, why do you think that way? And both ways, I think it really works. So I think that this balance between, I have an idea that what might come versus, I know what's going to come. Don't tell me that, there's something different this time, or kind of we don't need to rediscuss this. So yeah.
Be careful not to name any names with the old timers comments.
There's more to count. So there's no one name to name.
What springs to mind with this question is we have a plastic dinosaur in the office, which I'm pretty sure Joe has stolen from one of his poor children, with the idea to remind us not to be out of date and to stay ahead of the curve. And I think one of the things that's crucial is, complacency is death in venture, and maintaining ahead of the curve. And so if I was to say anything, it's, and maybe this is just from the approach for Gen Z, is, never assume you're the smartest person in the room, because there's always something else to learn.
That's not a Gen Z thing. I think you're absolutely right that I catch myself being very, I don't think arrogance is the right word. Arrogant to me is confidence multiplied by ignorance. And I don't think it's arrogance necessarily. And I think any age can be arrogant. I was much more arrogant as a 22-year-old than I am as a 50-year-old. But I'm much more cynical. I have to check myself at the door and go, hang on a second. Yes, you've seen this pitch a million times, but keep your mind open, stay fresh. And so I think there is, I have a slight issue with the story in this whole Gen Z piece, because I just see it as evolution. This is, of course, this is going to happen. And the last two people that I employed are much smarter than me and have much fresher eyes and are much keen. Okay, they don't have some of the experience, but as we've already kind of talked about, that's, there's a double-edged sword there. You kind of want the experience and some grey hair, and you want some fresh and some don't be such a dick pokes, and well, think about this pokes the other way. So I think it's a balancing act, but I don't think arrogance is a trophy of the old. If anything, I've become less arrogant. I think I might appear it, but inside I've become less arrogant and more thoughtful.
Potentially, if you're already employing and listening to younger people, you're probably not the target that I was describing. But I think the cynicism is maybe a good word as well to describe here, I think.
Yeah, it is quite hard. But I think anybody that's been in venture for more than 3 or 4 years, and and to me, businesses, the first 3 years is the fun, exciting, whatever, and then it's the fourth and the fifth year when you have to start going through the project, and that's the same in venture as it is in any business, I think. So I think if you've been in venture for more than, let's say, 3 years or whatever your number is, I think there's this unhealthy cynicism that can creep in, and we do have to slap each other in the office sometimes, because you see, oh god, not another Martech doing some fucking nonsense NFT bollocks. But it's not. You have to kind of just keep an open mind, and I think I'm waffling now. I'm going to shut up. Sorry, Kathy, go on.
Dan, I was actually happy you said, and slammed NFT there, because I think that NFTs is actually the example that I used to remind myself of the importance of having diversity of thought and also diversity of experiences and mindset, because to me it is completely, I cannot understand why you would ever want to pay for something that you own digitally, that you have, what the fuck. Because where I know it from is when you had people who would buy stuff in World of Warcraft for actual money, wired it to another person's bank, and then he would give you the item inside that game. And then, it seemed so clear to me, back then that seemed weird. Why would you do that in a fucking game, right? But today, you have Nike putting out NFT shoes, and I cannot understand who would pay money to own a Nike shoe digitally. But that just goes to tell me that I have no idea how this new generation thinks. And it's the same thing for many other groups in society, that I need to remember that I have no idea how this sub-community.
Yeah, but Andreas, they don't necessarily think like that. And obviously the arse has fallen out of NFT for a reason. So they don't, and a lot of it has then been taken and it's seen as an investment or a quick win or a quick cash. But ownership is in two hands. Ownership is in buying and transacting, and ownership is in rights and management. So a lot of these technology, I'm glad crypto is dying on its ass. I can't wait for crypto to fall on its face and just fuck off. Coins, that is, not crypto as in the technology, but coins. It's just rude. But there are some technologies like with ownership, like digital rights management and ownership. I think is going to be a thing that will fall out of NFTs. So, but people are always going to buy the sword in World of Warcraft. They're always going to do that, and that you don't need any clever technology. That's so nonsense. But whatever.
You do to transfer it. That's the whole point, right? They live digitally, because in World of Warcraft, if I buy it in World of Warcraft, I don't have it anywhere else. I can't then trade it for something else or blah blah blah. And that's the whole point, right? These games are now starting to be so connected that if you own something there, if you had bought it with a net, through the blockchain, whatever stuff, then you would also be able to then say, well, I'll also trade it over here for something else, and then I don't no longer have it in World of Warcraft, but I've got something in League of Legends or whatever, right? I don't know, or I have a nice picture background on my Facebook profile that I couldn't get if I didn't, right? So actually, Elon Musk did an NFT on Twitter, right? Because they allowed people to get verified by paying money.
I guess the value of all of this comes out of the social aspect of it, right? A lot of the times, if you're buying these things in these games, it's because your friends are doing it as well, and you maybe enjoy the experience. I was playing Sims yesterday, and I bought myself a new expansion pack, and I was very happy about that, and putting real money into that as well. But also at the same time, like it's for my own kind of experience in the game and overall. So, but I was definitely not a target audience for the NFTs or when the hype was kind of going up, everybody was buying their own, digital, whatever it was, right? I definitely didn't take part in that. But so I think there is a lot of nuance in this, and what translates to the new generation, what doesn't, what is just, a certain community being really excited about that, and what has wider application. And I think oversimplifying this is probably what's kind of damaging this kind of as a whole, because I think that, finding those use cases, I think is going to be the key to all of this, and I think it'll be interesting to see if they might actually manage to crack what's actually interesting about this, because a lot of the times I think I see it as well, Dan, a lot of the kind of you're pushing a technology onto something that doesn't need it. So do you really understand what it's good for? And I think that, again, these new people thinking and the way that we see the world and what we're willing to put our money in, I think is a question still to be answered.
Everything is worth a push, because the only way that things will change, and this conversation has happened because of crypto and NFTs and this big wave, which has been fueled by quantitative easing and low interest rates and a bubble. And that's what's created this massive weird speculation, crazy in loads and loads of different ways, not just NFT and crypto, loads and loads of different ways. I saw number plates going up, used car price. I mean, that's maybe even supply chain driven, but there's a lot of speculative, crazy. And then in the bad times, then what does Warren Buffett say? You find out who's been swimming naked in I forgot what the phrase Warren Buffett uses. You find out who's been swimming naked when the tide goes out, I think it goes. But lots of my techie friends say there is nothing really in a lot of the blockchain applications, as in from a technical perspective, there's nothing that you can't just do with a really solid database, as in the proposition. So, but we'll see. I think on the NFT side, I think the crazy apes, so fucking what? But on the digital rights ownership and management of your digital assets online, I think is going to be a thing. And using DLT for that, I think is going to be a thing. So I think there will be this nuts push, and then there'll be this pull back to a version of reality. Because ultimately, whether you're Gen Z, a boomer, an Xer, or a Zed, I don't even know what they are, we're still human beings, and we still want to interact and love and connect and have friends and engage and buy things and live in our world. But not all of that is going to be digital. So metaverse and this extra version for the Zuckerberg types, that's just not going to happen, because we still want to go out and date and have sex and smile and sit in a bar and go for a coffee. So we're not going to be living in these ultimate digital worlds, and that's where I think the line has to be kind of dragged back from this crazy.
I think I need to comment on that, because I think that no, we will not all live all the time in the metaverse. Clearly not. But coming from someone who played 8-10 hours of computer every single day, I can definitely see that there's a place where people, or a world where people will live 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day, and be super happy having that complementing their physical life. And the metaverse would be higher valued if it would be a completely new world where all of us would live 24 hours a day. It's only 4 hours a day, but it's still a pretty significant economy to be running, right? But I think that there's a reason why crypto is called a rabbit hole, because as always, we end up diving into it and then we can't get out again. But Kathy, please take us home.
I will. Thank you for that. So, like Andrea said, that is it for today, folks. So make sure to check out the newsletter on EU.VC, as well as following us on LinkedIn, where the conversation will continue, and the guys will post the latest funds that have raised, as well as the who's hiring section, along with, as always, a whole lot of gifs, memes and emojis. And we promise to do our best to entertain you. Bye.
The 15th of December is the day you need to have in mind. EUVC is hosting a webinar with Kathy, David, and Andreas. Kathy will show us how to approach PR as an individual and as a firm. Sign up at eu.vc/events.